I would like to start with an answer on why. Why am I here? Why are we investing in this company? And why that is a good idea. In 2012, Bart and myself were convinced that electric mobility was the future and that Europe needed a covering network of fast charging stations. Not many people were as convinced as we were at the time. They didn't want to invest in charging infrastructure until the amount of EVs on our roads would be much and much bigger. The chicken and egg problem. But we did. Fastned was founded to build the fast charging infrastructure that is needed to allow people to start driving electric cars. Our thinking was that if an early investment in a charging station allows you to secure a great location for years to come, that has a very significant value. Today, it seems very logical that locations are the stronghold of a successful charging business. At the time, that was a revolutionary thought. It became our mission to give freedom to electric drivers and accelerate the transition to electric mobility. Our horizon is the milestone of reaching 1,000 stations across Europe, where we sell only sustainable energy from the sun and wind. That is what we work on, day in and day out. Freedom means that you can drive anywhere. Think road movies. That is what driving is all about. And that is the freedom that Fastned delivers to its customers. Why is it important to accelerate the transition to electric mobility? Climate change is one of the biggest challenges that humanity faces. And the consequences of climate change on our societies are devastating. What is the root cause? It is the rapidly increasing CO2 concentration in the atmosphere. And an important part of these emissions is created by people driving cars with internal combustion engines. Our core business is to sell electricity to electric drivers, electricity that's derived from the sun and wind. With every kilowatt hour we sell, we displace roughly 1/3 of a liter of fossil fuel that would otherwise burn up in our atmosphere. And with the number of electric vehicles on the road and therefore the charging demand growing exponentially, the amount of carbon dioxide emissions avoided will grow exponentially as well. Bart and I founded Fastned with the aim to solve the chicken and egg problem of electric cars versus charging infrastructure, in order to enable people to start driving electric cars and contribute to the battle against climate change. The environment part of the acronym ESG is therefore a key part of the DNA of Fastned. It is the raison d'être of the company and a big driver for everyone working at Fastned. Logically, you can expect us to continue to report on our progress on this topic. When I started this company, many people were questioning whether or not electric cars were the future. And if so, would these then use fast charging stations? What I find incredibly important today is to signal the massive scale of what is coming. Manufacturing is scaling up. The number of car models offered to the public is growing rapidly. And brand by brand, car makers accelerate their EV programs. It's not enough to just add more places to charge on a map by adding a charger or two to a petrol station. The massive scale at which this is happening means that we need big charging stations that can handle hundreds of vehicles a day. And we're not the only ones saying this. Just look at Tesla, that is constantly growing the number of supercharger locations, as well as adding existing chargers to these existing sites. It's incredible how the battery electric vehicle market is consistently able to break its previous records. 2021 was the best year. The first quarter of 2022 was another record. And in almost all our markets, 10 to 20% of new cars sold were fully electric. And car maker by car maker, the messages are coming in of being sold out for the season. So production is scaling rapidly, but customer demand is scaling even faster. And it has only just begun. All these electric cars that people buy, they need electricity to drive around. That is our market, the charging market. And this market is growing exponentially for many, many years to come. Today, between 1% and 2% of cars in our markets are electric. Around 2030, all new cars sold will be fully electric. But be aware, from that moment onwards, it will take roughly 2 decades before the entire car stock on our roads is electric, as cars are used for around 15 to 20 years. This is why the charging market will be a growth market for several decades to come. And that's why we take a long-term perspective on it. In the first years, most of the EV drivers were affluent Tesla owners, and most of charging was at home. But when over time all cars become electric, the majority of drivers will not have a driveway. They will require public infrastructure to refill their batteries. Just to provide a bit of perspective on the various countries we operate in the Netherlands, we're talking about close to 70% of people not having a driveway to install their own wallbox. In Germany or the UK, it is around 50% of people that do not have private parking, research shows. We believe the answer to that is large, scalable fast charging stations, where hundreds of vehicles can charge per day. This in contrast to some that believe that municipalities are responsible for scaling the number of AC poles on our streets. Yes, this was possible with only a limited number of drivers that needed charging. Only given that one slow charging pole can only service a handful of EVs, it is very difficult to scale. Therefore, we will see that in the coming years, the number of public slow charging poles will start lagging the demand for charging. So the need for fast charging is accelerating even faster than the charging market as a whole. Luckily, new electric car models are charging faster and faster. When we started 10 years ago, the charge speed of the fastest charging car, the Nissan Leaf, was 50 kilowatt. Today, it is cars like the Porsche Taycan with 270 kilowatt, the Tesla Model 3 with 250, and the Hyundai Kia platforms with 230 kilowatt that lead the pack. This development makes fast charging more attractive every year. For example, when driving longer distances, but also to enable owning an EV for people that do not have a driveway. Higher charge speeds therefore also accelerate our market. Data also shows that cars with larger batteries and higher charge speeds go to our fast charging stations more often. That's something not everyone expected. Market consultants like the Boston Consulting Group and McKinsey & Company have also looked at this. And we think it's worthwhile to share some of their thinking. They agree on 3 points. The European charging market will grow exponentially in the coming decade, moving from roughly 4 terawatt-hour in 2020 to roughly 90 terawatt-hour by 2030, scaling the market by roughly a factor 20 and powering up more than 20 million EVs. Home charging will continue to be a popular means of charging, but its share in the total charging mix will decrease. Public fast charging is going to be the fastest growing means of charging, capturing most of the growth. This segment will grow from roughly half a terawatt-hour in 2020 to more than 25 terawatt-hour in 2030, scaling the segment by a factor 50. They also agree on the forces driving these developments. I mentioned them before. New cars can charge faster, and less drivers will have the ability to charge at home. Also, the rollout of public slow charging is difficult to make profitable, when the aim is to roughly sell the electricity at purchase price, hence not making a margin to recoup infrastructure investments. The result of this is that fast charging, in terms of euros, is expected to take the lion's share in a charging market. Moreover, investing in fast charging stations brings perpetual exposure to kilowatt-hour sales. This in contrast to selling wall boxes or slow charging poles. Now that we know fast charging is key to the charging market, we need to ask ourselves the question, where should these fast charging stations be located? Something Bart and I asked ourselves 10 years ago. To make a parallel to shopping streets and real estate value, we asked ourselves, what is the shopping street of e-mobility? Where do most EV drivers buy their kilowatt hours when en route? In our view, great locations have 4 important characteristics. 1, a location contract needs to support us in making a long-term investment. Think 15 to ideally 20 or 30 years. Otherwise, one cannot justify investments in things like a big grid connection, future-proof chargers, a large solar roof, and so on. 2, it should be scalable and high traffic to make our investment in solving the chicken and egg situation pay back. Scalability means a large plot of land that is dedicated to charging, capable of housing many chargers, and is well accessible to hundreds of electric cars that are going in and out each day. 3, we're on a mission to accelerate the energy transition, so we want to make the infrastructure we built visible. We want people to know that they do not have to be afraid to go electric. That is also part of the brand we built. This is why sites should allow for a big station with a solar roof and preferably a totem, conveying our brand message. And finally, 4, when stopping over for a charge, we want our customers to have the best available charging experience. That also includes offering them coffee, sandwiches, and so on. So having the ability to offer amenities or having them present on site is very important to us. When looking for stations or when evaluating an opportunity, these features are the first that we look for. Which brings me to a question that we often get. But how do you then acquire such locations? Important to answering this question is to understand that amongst the locations that tick these boxes, motorway service areas are very well represented. And in Europe, the motorways and their service areas are most often owned by the government. That is why one of the key routes to acquire great locations is to work with public authorities. So we spend a lot of time talking to governments about how they can best develop and accelerate the rollout of charging infrastructure. Often they think they should go for the option on the left side of this slide, to ask existing petrol stations to add chargers. That seems logical, right? Only history has shown it isn't. Because it comes down to asking an oil company to invest in something that accelerates the demise of their own business. That is why we advise these governments to follow a different path, to create a completely new filling station one for electric cars, and issue that concession via a competitive tender process. What helps us in this case is that all interested parties willing to invest in that energy transition can participate, and that the best bid wins. Moreover, setting up a new station is needed anyway. Just think about it. Take the example of a service area in a petrol station that has 10 pumps. In 2030, that petrol station will have around 20% less fossil traffic, so 2 pumps can be taken away. But 2 chargers will never be enough to satisfy the new electric cars that have replaced the old fossil ones. Charging simply takes more time than filling up your car with petrol. This is also confirmed by several research institutes, such as the Dutch TNO and its French counterpart. Again and again, we see that tenders lead to far better results. The stations realized are bigger, with more and faster chargers, a better uptime and a better customer experience. And last but not least, the infrastructure is being realized at pace. Competitive tenders are better for the electric driver and the energy transition. Over the last decade, we've successfully applied this recipe to acquire great locations in 6 countries. And Fastned is practically the only party that does this on a European scale. Therefore, we are regularly asked by authorities to provide advice on accelerating the rollout of charging infrastructure in their country and how to shape the necessary tenders to do so. But convincing governments that tenders work best doesn't make you win them. Let me now tell you how we do that. Fastned started a decade ago with building the first stations, developing a software backbone on which we run our infrastructure, acquiring the permits for the first charging stations, and much more. Together, all these elements make up one of the best charging concepts in the market. A recent study we did on Google location reviews is that Fastned ranks best. When it comes to charging infrastructure tenders, governments realize more and more the importance of quality of service and experience, as they find out that competing on price alone simply does not lead to good infrastructure. Having one of the best charging concepts in the market and more experience than most others allows us to hand in very competitive bids. And this not only helps us in winning tenders, it also helps in closing deals with commercial location owners who are in search of a great charging concept to make their location interesting for electric drivers. When we started 10 years ago, there were no off-the-shelf software backends to manage a charging network with. There was no call center specialized in charging services that you could contract. The consequence of starting early is that Fastned internalized basically all these crucial aspects of a charging business. And we did this better than anyone else in the market. For instance, we have more or less acted as our own main contractor when building our stations, because no one had experience with building charging stations with solar roofs. That is why we now know basically every nut and bolt of our stations. And as you can imagine, this knowledge gives us a great advantage when negotiating with contractors. Similarly, our customer success agents are sitting next to our software and maintenance teams, and hiccups in the charging experience can therefore often be resolved quickly. Having the know-how and vertical integration allows us to learn, improve, and automate. and therefore scale our business much more quickly. This sets us apart from many others. Based on the many capabilities we've built over the last decade and the assets that we acquired, we see many opportunities to grow our business and deliver another contribution to the battle against climate change, as well as improving our customer experience. Two of these I want to highlight here today. As we speak, Fastned is building its first charging station with its own shop. The service area Brecht on the route Antwerp-Rotterdam will be the first of many more. We opened the station last week, and I'm proud to say we plan to open the new shop before the end of the year. Here, we'll have a barista bar with great coffee and food, such as sandwiches and fresh croissants. In order to make this happen quickly, we plan to work with partners for shop operations. Another opportunity we see coming is electric trucks. Over the past years, we've seen more and more trucks charging at our stations, and this is only expected to continue to grow. Currently, we're working on plans to enable our stations to accommodate these larger vehicles better. For example, we're working with authorities to get permission to create additional space to allow these larger vehicles to maneuver. Our large stations, concessions, and grid connections offer a great starting point to support this transition. Let me now, before finalizing my presentation, walk you through our view on the road to a network of 1,000 stations. First of all, there are 4,000 motorway service areas in Europe. Those are locations that tick all our boxes, as we've seen earlier. Here lies a big opportunity for us. But motorway services are not the only locations that we're after. We already developed a significant amount of locations with location owners of strategic land along roads with a lot of traffic. Take, for example, the picture on the bottom left here. This is a render of the station that we are currently building on the outskirts of the city of Bochum, in the densely populated area North Rhine-Westphalen. The motorway junction close by deals with more than 100,000 cars on a daily basis. This location is being developed with a private landowner and will result in a restaurant and a Fastned station. Our estimates are that there are more than 100,000 of these and similar locations that will be in need for a great charging concept in the coming decade. So how do these routes, one public, one private, add up to 1,000 stations or more by 2030? That is what you see on this slide. 3 pillars, 2 public, 1 private. In order from left to right, motorway service areas, public city locations, and private developments. Let's start with the motorway service areas. We know that there are roughly 4,000 motorway service areas in Europe. In the past, around 30 to 60% of the available locations were put up for tender. That would lead to an opportunity of around 2,000 locations for Fastned. Depending on the success of Fastned to scale its concept across borders and win these tenders, that would lead to somewhere between 200 and up to 600 new locations. In a similar way, we can take a look at private developments. There are more than 100,000 private grounds that tick most of these boxes. Many of these location owners will look for a third party that offers a charging concept that is interesting for electric drivers. And over time, and depending on our success in making deals with these location owners, it is expected to lead to 1,000 or more new locations. Then there's the middle pillar, city developments. An interesting example is the Oxford Superhub, the largest charging station of the UK, which we currently built together with Tesla and will be opening next month. We expect many more of these opportunities in the coming years. Now, what is the red line through all of these routes to acquire locations? It is our experience and our concept. We believe that we can win tenders and private location deals better than others because we deliver a better charging experience. So to come to a conclusion, we believe fast charging is a very attractive segment of the charging market. And this is why, over the last decade, we have worked hard to put in place what we believe are the fundamentals for a thriving fast charging business. This makes Fastned uniquely positioned to take advantage of the exponentially growing amount of EVs on the road. Thank you. I would now like to hand you over to Maria and Robin, who will tell more about our winning charging concept.